Welcome to EduRev. I am absolutely thrilled to invite you into this masterclass on a truly fascinating era in history. Today, we're going to explore how Indian culture didn't just survive, but actually thrived and grew so much richer during the highly turbulent period from the 13th to the 17th centuries. To set the stage for our lesson, I want you to really listen to this profound quote from Mahatma Gandhi. He said, "I want the cultures of all the lands to be blown about my house as freely as possible, but I refuse to be blown off my feet by any." As a teacher, I absolutely love this quote. It perfectly captures the spirit of the period we're about to study. Indian culture was brilliantly open to adopting and adapting external influences, but it never ever lost its ancient foundation. So here's our game plan for today's explainer. We'll be covering the resilience of culture, faith and devotion, the evolution of Indian arts, women in science, and culture in daily life, right before we wrap up with a quick summary and a look at the EduRev app. Let's get into it. Starting with section 1, the resilience of culture. So how exactly did Indian traditions endure despite massive political instability and all those foreign invasions? Well, think about other great ancient civilizations for a second. Places like Mesopotamia and Egypt. Over time, their original cultures were largely diluted or honestly outright destroyed. But Indian culture, it stood incredibly strong. It remained deeply rooted, resilient, and continuous. And you might be wondering why. Well, it's because it possessed these timeless values, a real scientific temper, and just this unbelievable ability to adapt. When new rulers arrived from Central and West Asia back in the 13th century, they brought totally new political ideas and administrative systems. But Indian culture didn't shatter under the pressure. It simply assimilated those influences. Moving right along to section 2, faith, devotion, and unity. Here, we're looking at some of the greatest spiritual minds of the era. We've got Kabir up in North India talking about one God. We have Ravidas, who came from a leather-working family, literally breaking down rigid walls of caste to promote equality. There's Guru Nanak traveling far and wide with a powerful message of universal equality. And Meenabai in Rajasthan, just pouring her absolute heart into Bhakti devotion. Now, what's really fascinating here is the unified message. These saints came from entirely different regions and backgrounds, yet they all shared a common goal. They wanted to connect directly with the divine through love, completely bypassing rigid rituals and the need for priests. To really wrap your head around this mindset, let me share Kabir's brilliant analogy with you. He said, "When wheat is ground into flour, distinctions between grains disappear. They become one substance." What he meant by this is that when a person truly realizes the divine, the human-made differences between different names for God, like Ram and Rahim, they simply dissolve. It literally all becomes one substance. And you know what? This beautifully parallels what was happening within Islamic traditions at the exact same time through Sufism. Sufism is this devotional path focused on a deeply personal inner search for God. Great Sufi saints like Khwaja Moinuddin Chishti and legendary poets like Rumi used powerful devotional music called Qawwali and silent meditation known as zikr. These practices mirrored the Bhakti movement so closely that both traditions often overlapped. It enriched Indian society with this incredible shared theme of spiritual unity. Alright, on to section 3, the evolution of Indian arts. Music in India took two magnificent yet very distinct paths during this period. Up in North India, we see the rise of Hindustani classical music. This style actively embraced Persian and Sufi influences. Just think of legendary figures like Tansen in Akbar's court, a master who absorbed all these diverse influences yet still composed praises to Krishna and Shiva. In contrast, down in South India, Carnatic music developed largely on its own. It preserved an older, distinct regional tradition championed by incredibly devoted musicians like Purandar Das, who composed literally hundreds of thousands of devotional songs. And this dynamic brilliantly illustrates what was happening in the visual arts too. On one hand, you had traditional Rajput paintings focusing on Hindu themes, flora, fauna, and local mythology. But on the other hand, the Mughal courts introduced these intricate miniature paintings with strong Persian influences, focusing on secular court scenes and created in highly collaborative studios called ateliers. Over time, these distinct styles actively exchanged techniques and colors. And what did we get? A stunningly rich, blended art form spread across the royal courts. This blending actually physically reshaped the landscape. We see the introduction of the Persian charbagh, these gorgeous four-part gardens symbolizing the rivers of paradise built right around monuments. We also see Rajput rulers incorporating Mughal geometric patterns and water channels into their own strongholds, like the magnificent Amer Fort in Jaipur. And crucially, we see amazing cultural resilience in the defiant rebuilding of sacred spaces. Take the Sri Ranganatha Swami temple for example. It was destroyed by invaders, but faithfully, beautifully reconstructed by the end of the 14th century. Next up is section 4, Women, Education and Science. There was a pretty stark regional difference in the public lives of women during this time. In North India, continuous military campaigns and invasions sadly led to a decline in women's public engagement. Practices like parda and the ghungat became a lot more widespread, both for protection and as symbols of nobility. Yet even there, we had brilliant exceptions, right? Like Razia Sultan, the only female ruler of the Delhi Sultanate, and the highly influential Mughal Empress Noor Jahan. Meanwhile, in South India, elite women largely maintained their active public roles. They worked as administrators, accountants, musicians, and believe it or not, even wrestlers in the Vijayanagar court. How cool is that? Now, as your teacher, I have to say I present this timeline with immense pride. While Europe was still centuries away from these discoveries, the Kerala School of Mathematics was quietly changing the world. Back in the 14th century, you had Narayana Pandita authoring the Ganita Kamudi and Madhava pioneering the very foundations of calculus, as well as discovering the exact value of pi as an infinite series. And by the year 1500, Nilakantha formulated a planetary model mapping the orbits of Mercury and Venus, literally decades before the European astronomer Copernicus. The Indian scientific temper was very much alive and thriving. Which brings us to section 5, Culture in Daily Life. Okay, let's dive into some delicious history. Did you know that some of your absolute favorite snacks are the direct result of 13th century cultural exchanges? It's true. The beloved samosa was actually adapted from the Persian sambusa brought over by West Asian chefs to the Delhi Sultanate. That sweet spiral jalebi? That's the Indian version of the Persian zalabia. And naan is traditional Persian clay oven bread. Our cuisine is quite literally a melting pot of historical influences. So let me ask you this. Have you ever noticed how our traditional clothing also reflects this massive blend of cultures? Just think about the garments you see at weddings or festivals today for a second. The legacy is woven right into our fabrics. This period introduced the tunic-like jama and the pajama into the coats. When weavers from Gujarat moved to Benares, they were actually encouraged by Mughal patronage to use zari and brocade. You know, those beautiful raised gold and silver threads? This collaboration created the iconic Banarasi silk sari we revere today. Even the famous Pashmina shawls from Kashmir began featuring the Persian butt or paisley motif, which made them highly prized across both Asia and Europe. Finally, we arrive at section 6, our summary and a look at the EduRev app. Let's quickly review our core takeaways regarding cultural currents from the 13th to the 17th centuries. We learned that the Bhakti and Sufi movements provided incredible spiritual unity by bypassing rigid barriers. We saw how music, painting, and architecture beautifully blended Indian and Persian styles. We witnessed amazing cultural resilience where destroyed temples were rebuilt and traditions continued against the odds. We marveled at the groundbreaking math and science coming out of the South. And finally, we saw how daily life, from the food we eat to the clothes we wear, was forever enriched by this vibrant cultural exchange. I really hope you enjoyed this explainer as much as I enjoy teaching it. If you want to keep exploring this topic, dive into practice quizzes and get the absolute best study materials you need to download the EduRev app.